I would like to welcome them, everybody, even Dr. Schwartz, to our session today. Mike, you look suitably casual. Been out on the golf course this morning, have you?
Yes, all morning, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, me neither. Anyway, today, first of all, welcome. And I want to say today is going to be kind of an important day because the topic could not be more timely. We're going to be talking today about where in the post-pandemic world to practice. Now, here's what I'm saying. We're going to be looking at where you'd want to start up, where you want to purchase, and we're also going to talk about where to get a job. I track very carefully every day what parts of the United States are opening up, what parts within each of the areas are opening up, because counties and states aren't doing everything at the same time. So the priorities are all different. When it comes to the world of professional practice, we're in a bit of a civil war because there are, I didn't realize this. So I want to first of all apologize. Guys, I didn't realize there was such animus against private practice doctors. I had assumed that everybody thought, hey, healthcare, these are our friends. These doctors are our friends. But, you know, when I found out state regulators did not want veterinary practice to open in several states, I went, guys, animals don't understand. They need care. And if they happen to have need their shots, they need to be wormed. They've got dietary issues. They've got trauma. Guys, they need help. The same thing is true, oddly enough, about optometry. So let me just tell you my experience with optometrists. I was out there trying to figure out, well, can optometrists in this state open? Can they open here? No, they cannot. And I was trying to say, why? Because they say inherently, and this is some weenie who is not a doctor, not even a nurse, not even a whatever, they're just a regulator. They say social distancing is not possible in an optometric practice. And I said, well, are you saying they have to sit so far back from the patient that they can't treat them? Yes, that's exactly what we're saying. Their breath can touch and therefore infect the person they're with. I said, what if they're using a mask? Well, maybe, but these are people who are telling doctors how to treat their patients. And I'm going, you guys, you people are just sad. So I had assumed that they would just go, well, the necessary services, why wouldn't they just let that happen? I have been finding even urgent care facilities. They're saying, no, we don't want you to open. We just want there to, and I said, well, emergency care would involve the pandemic care, wouldn't it? Hydration treatments that are out there. No, and it's bizarre to me. So here's the bottom line. You already know, that some parts of the United States are doing great. Come on in, we're happy to have you. Other places, they are so reluctant that they don't want that to happen. And I'm going to put the worst offenders are going to be in New York and New Jersey. But I went through a thing with Maine. I mean, maybe you've heard this. Maine just simply doesn't want anybody to leave their house under any circumstance. And they go, are you people out of your mind? Because it runs against human nature. Now, I had mentioned last week the health belief model, which is by Rosenstock back in the 1950s. It talks about how people behave regarding healthcare, how to motivate them for care, how to get them to do things. I have been absolutely shocked that people who claim to be pro-science are running entirely against what I consider to be science. Now, I was a little late getting on this morning because a new study was just released and new research has been applied. And guys, that's what's going on. Now, that being said, I want to tell our viewers places that are going to be dire, and that's the term I'm using. It is not dire because of the coronavirus. It's regulation that is making it difficult or impossible to practice in some locations. It is entirely arbitrary, and it is left up to non-doctors in a significant number of cases. Places that I thought would be really pro-doctor and pro-science and very progressive in terms of care of patients. I thought really we're going to be on top of things. And some of them are the least desirable places to proceed to practice. Now, that being said, I still want to talk to you about places that I consider that are going to open up faster, that are going to be better to practice in, where you probably can apply for work if you happen to be in the position to do that, and even to get into a lease. Now, I'm not going to go into this because it is very, very complicated state by state. Some places are doing really well as far as they're allowing business contracts to open, others are not. There are some practices that have not opened their doors, that haven't paid their rent, who are hoping against hope that the federal government will rescue them and give them some money so they can. We're talking about loans, not the Paycheck Protection Program you've heard about. But I'm saying business loans are not applicable in all states. So, all right, enough of all that bad news. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to kind of get into some of the stuff that I'm finding out that you probably want to know in terms of demography. Now, I've been changing this all morning, and again, please forgive me, but so much has changed, so much is shifting that I just wanted to let you know what things are right now. So post-pandemic sites for practice is what we're talking about. Now, let me make sure you understand something. If the area has been hit by the pandemic and there are continuing to be increased cases and the mortality rate continues to rise, that is not necessarily a reason I would not recommend the site. I know you may go, what? No, the thing is, the pandemic has, it's responsive to the weather, heat, humidity, and therefore I believe that in time during the summer, it's going to kind of resolve itself. What I'm concerned about most are regulators, and they're making it hard to be in business. Now, again, we're talking about places to start up or to purchase in the post-pandemic world. I should also mention I am not exclusively looking to help students and residents, but also existing practices that say, should we test the water with a toe and say we are now ready to open, or should we plan to do our publicity and all that? I'm actually going to talk to you as much as I can about specific places. So bookmark what I'm doing here. Now, everybody, you already know the landscape has changed, and ultimately the factors to determine whether or not a practice location will be good or not, it's just not the same calculus that we had before. I mentioned this before, we've got some competitors who are using databases that are using algorithms that are a little old, and guys, they have to update them. They can't keep saying, well, with so much percentage growth here and so many people with money there, it's a good place to go. The competition ratios are not mattering like they used to. So we can't just rely on old data. Sorry, that's just a fact you got to deal with. So I want to tell you the thing that I think is going to happen, and please hear me out. There are corporate and multi-site offices that are going to have an advantage. They have an advantage, and I'll talk about their advantages in a minute because some apply to you and some don't. But I believe that the smart ones are going to pounce. And I think you must know where they're going to pounce and why they're going to pounce. Even if you want to find a job, you still need to know this. Now, when I say they're going to pounce, remember one of the biggest reasons why corporates and multi-site offices, those that are well capitalized and have multiple doctors, why they have the advantage, one of the big ones is because they don't have to wait on a loan guarantee from a bank. They already have an equity line of credit or just a business line of credit that they can apply. And that is going to help them a lot. Now, some of you have got a line of credit as well, but you may not think it's very big, but I want you to know having a relationship with a financial institution is a huge advantage right now. You already have probably a credit line. How big it is, I don't know, but you have to be careful. I don't care how large your organization is. You've got to be careful you're not overspending or committing and not being able to recover the income from your practice. This is not a typical practice management issue. Your practice is worth something, and you can often borrow against your receivables. You know, how many patients you've got who are in treatment. But all of that has been changing because some states have said, I don't care who you are, they're not coming in and they're not going to be able to pay you, and you can't even have your staff in the offices. That's how draconian it is. So let me start off by saying this. Look, doctors, I don't care how big or small your practice is, you need to be back hands-on. Don't simply rely upon your patient, your staff to do this. I said this last week and I want to reiterate it. If your staff has not revitalized your patient base so that you can put it into some kind of a mailing list or a contact list that is for mail and also for internet, man, you better get that person in the office and make sure that they have fired up the engines, because you're going to need that, especially in the next 2 or 3 weeks. By the way, you already know that a lot of states have said, yeah, you can kind of come in and open your office, but you can't see patients. What I think that's a green light to do is to get ready to open. So I said something also I want to reiterate. Perhaps the most important investment you can make today is a sign or a banner. I've got guidelines for signs and banners in our how to open a practice thing that we've got that's on our website at Dr. Demographics, in terms of size, cost, where you put them up, and what you say on them. Guys, if you haven't gotten to that point yet, you're going to need to really soon. So I said the first thing is the database. Second thing is let's get that signage ready to go. Okay, now why do the large practices, particularly those with credit and staff, have the advantage? First of all, it's the credit line. It's the well-funded practice. And I have strongly recommended that even if you don't have money coming in, hop on down to the bank or call and say, guys, we need to make sure that when we're ready, we're ready. So let's not play around. The large practices have a big advantage because they can put money into their advertising that you can't. And I'm not talking about just an email to the patients. I'm talking about signage, postcards, and other things to make sure people know that you are open, or when you are open, ready to start seeing patients. They have also ordered inventory. If you haven't done that, I strongly recommend that you do that. That's a practice management issue. It's not a marketing issue. But guys, I'm going to tell you, if you don't have masks, gloves, everything set to start seeing patients, it's going to be too late when your neighbors are all of a sudden seeing patients and do have stuff and you don't. I'm also saying you've got to have a publicity plan ready to go. Least expensive, best one I know is on drdemographics.com. There, I've said it. Now, the other thing I've got to tell you, if you haven't done it, even though they may say you're not supposed to see anybody in your office, you got to get your staff organized. If you don't have the staff ready to go, when the time comes, you're going to be in trouble. Now, remember, at the 1st of May is when I told you a lot of people were doing it. They really waited till the 4th, which was the Monday. That is what's happened in all of the states that I've called and said, guys, where are you doing? What's going on? That's what they're telling me. So they started kind of on Monday, which would be, as of this viewing, that would be yesterday. But a lot of people are ramping up this week, and we'll start seeing patients fully in about a week from now. If you're not ready to do that, someone's going to eat your lunch. Now, let's move on. I want to tell you advantages that larger practices have, and those of them who are watching this already know it. They've got low interest rates are working in everybody's favor right now. You already know the Fed has poured money into everything. The banks are a little bit flush with cash because they don't have a lot of places they can spend it, and they can't spend it profitably. That just means now's the time to start planning for the future. They've got a high demand that has been put off. Some offices are telling me that they're getting a lot of people coming in right now. Others are saying, no, we haven't seen anybody. Nobody's really calling. I think that's an issue of demographics. because there are some demographic factors, or let's say populations, particularly those with high income and 50 years of age and older. They have greater demand and awareness of what their needs are, and those are the first ones to plan and appoint. The other thing I haven't talked about, and that's location choices. Now, in this last 2 or 3 months, there have been practices that have decided not to renew their leases. In short, they may look like there's a doctor there, but there may not be. And those practices that are a little larger and a little sharper know those prime pieces of real estate they can get for a song for a moderately short-term lease. And it's not the amount you're spending, it's the amount of time you have to commit to the site that makes the difference. I won't go into that right now. I'll let my friend Norm Gelfand figure that one out with you later. But the location choices are becoming much more important than they've been before, and that's really why I'm doing this session today. Now, let's talk about what is making a bad site for practice right now. It used to be that a bad site was one that was difficult to find, or where there was nobody passing by, or no parking or little parking. Some of those issues are going to continue after the pandemic is over, but really we're seeing some factors which are becoming bad for sites that weren't bad before. And if you happen to be in an existing practice that is a bad site, you may want to think about redoing where you're practicing. Now, what makes a bad site? And I'm going to tell you, these are 5 factors that I have been researching, and my fellow demographers, we've been kind of figuring out what makes a bad place. How do you evaluate for practices? Because remember, a practice valuation study, like by a broker, they're going to be looking a little bit at demographics. Well, the truth is they ought to be looking a lot at demographics of where the demographics are going, not where they have been. So the first thing is a reduced population. There are some parts of the United States where people have been leaving in droves. They've been leaving in droves because, first of all, the quality of life isn't good, or because regulations have been unfavorable for where they live. It could be that they moved in with their cousin in a state 2 states over, or where the prices for housing have been crazy relative to what people are getting. So there have been a lot of people who are moving. You have not read a single story in the media about it because it's only in the demographic trade publications they're really tracking this. But I want you to trust me. There are a lot of people who are leaving where they are and going to some other place. I want to talk to you about where. Now, the other thing is, and this is very hard to track because of the way the pandemic has been regulated. If you're in an area that has a low employment rate, it's going to be a bad site. Now, what makes for a bad employment rate? The truth is, you can't know for another couple of months whether the area is supporting the people who live and work in that area. And I'll be honest with you, it's really going to be late August and early September. You're going to begin to see what has really come out about the employment rate in your area. But think of it this way. Those places where people are getting a check right now may have a very good employment rate, but they're not necessarily going to look more desirable in terms of how much income people have because it's static. People who are making a check now are not going to start making a check later. So if you think, oh, Washington, D.C., Albany, Sacramento, those are big state capitals. When you have that, you got a lot of people with a steady paycheck. But once things change, those may be the same places that it looks bad because relative to the other kinds of employment that are out there, like private business is going to start hiring, and those other places are not going to be able to hire. They may actually have a problem finding employees to fill the available jobs. I know right now no one's thinking about it, but trust me, it's going to be a big deal. The other thing is low income. There are places right now, not only that have low employment rates that can bounce back, but low income means the people who have settled within an area don't have much potential to work and aren't going to be in a very good position to earn. So low income is going to become one of those things that you're going to have to really look at. Now, what's an indicator of low income in a pandemic that's shut down? Well, it's homeless. Not surprising. People who are wandering around the streets, they're only going to keep down income. They're not going to allow for new development because that is the way that unemployed transients tend to live. They make it so that nobody wants to live near them. So what right now may seem like there are people wandering around may not be such a good place for your practice. Because the other thing that goes along with low income, particularly chronic low income, is high crime. And we have not talked about high crime. But doctors, if your practice is in an area where there are a lot of people who are wandering around during the day, I can almost guarantee you it's going to become, if it hasn't already, a high crime location, and you're going to want to get out of that site. Now, there's high susceptibility to new infection is going to make for a bad site. Here's the thing. What makes one place more susceptible to new infections than another? Well, homelessness is one. But oddly enough, it's plumbing and having a wide range of places for people to live in terms of how much the housing costs. So new infection is likely to be tied closely to a homeless population or a highly transient population. That's where we're going to see the new hotspots within the next few months, starting in about 30 days. People are going to go, geez, there are people who are really not doing well or have been crapping in the streets or urinating. That is going to be the sign of new infections that are coming. And as soon as the public becomes aware of the new infection rates, which the media hasn't publicized, there will be a shift for people to move businesses, employers, and people to live. They're not going to want to put up with it. Now, the fifth thing is also pretty important, and that is a stressed tax base. Now, once again, nobody talks about it. Right now, everybody's kind of going, well, the government, whoever the government might be, is going to have to pay people. All right, but what that really means, that money has to get paid back. And if there's not an industry that's going to be sustaining the tax base, it's going to look pretty awful. So when we're talking about what makes for a bad site, these, in my opinion, are in order. The reduced population is going to be a terrible thing for your practice. Low employment, low income, high susceptibility for new infection, and the stressed tax base. It's got a longer window, but it's going to make some parts of the United States that have been doing pretty well not look good at all. And yes, I'm talking to you, Los Angeles, because the locations in Los Angeles that have stressed taxes also have a stressed population and are going to show the new hotspots. All right, I'm going to keep going on. What makes for a good site? And I'm going to tell you what I want you to be looking for if you're thinking, can I start up here? Can I buy a practice? Can I get a job? Because all three of those are going to be important here. There has to be a stable employment base. And no, doctors, I'm not talking about your employment. I mean people who work in the area. Now, the obvious thing is people go, oh, well, big employers are going to be the ones that are going to be more desirable to be near. Would that it were, would that it were. The economy, as it slowly comes back, and it will, is going to start off not with big employers hiring people, but very small employers hiring people. After the small, very tiny employers with the 3 and 4 employees come back, then it goes back to the larger employers. It'll jump over the mid-range employers because the mid-range employers don't necessarily have the capacity to hire and put people to work as fast. The smallest employers do, and the largest employers do. It's everything in the middle that's going to make the employment base kind of scary. Now, second thing, reasonable cost of living. There are parts of the United States that are exceptionally expensive, and I'll mention New York City as an obvious example, Manhattan. But we also have to take Seattle and San Francisco into account, lots of parts of Los Angeles. Places in Phoenix actually can get pretty expensive. If you found a place where it looks like the cost of living has not gone crazy, you're going to be in a better position. And this goes along with the third thing, a diverse economy in recovery, meaning it's nice if there's a lot of rich people, but rich people don't look for work. They're already employed or they already own assets to keep them going. It's the diverse economy where there is a range between those who are moderately inexpensive blue-collar workers and moderately affluent white-collar workers. That's going to be the sweet spot on the diverse economy. Those are the places that you ought to try to say, that's where I want to be. Now, here's the problem. As I'm looking at databases of employment, I can't tell you where they are at this moment, but it's going to be important. But one thing I do know that out of the pandemic, single-family dwellings are going to become all important. Places that have small rental apartments are going to suffer tremendously at the early part of the recovery. That's because they're more expensive than they ought to be, and people are saying, I am so sick of living with 5 other people in a 2-bedroom apartment. No, I do not want that. So they say that the housing recovery is going to start with single-family dwellings, whether they're owner-occupied or renter-occupied, I don't know. But that seems to be an indicator of what a good site's going to be. And the mix of demographics, in other words, a range of people, rich, poor, whatever, that's what you're going to look for. Now, I don't want to run out of time, and I do have some specific places I want you to look at and places that I want you to avoid. So please stick with me. These are the dire states. They're not all the dire sites within the state, but right now, number one that they're saying has the kiss of death is Michigan. And everybody thought it would be someplace else. Problem is, Michigan has had nearly a civil war because of the lockdown. There are people who kind of want to start warming up the economy and opening some things. The governor and the legislature has said, no way, nobody does that. We're getting rid of this. And Michigan has been really rough. So people are predicting it's not going to recover as fast. Then comes Louisiana. Now, Louisiana has some challenges socioeconomically anyway. But it's the big cities that they're kind of saying in Louisiana are going to suffer worst. New Orleans, Baton Rouge, they're going to have a problem, particularly if they're in the city. The residential areas in Louisiana are going to do fine. Single-family dwelling places, they're actually going to do reasonably well. Those are where the businesses, small employers are going to go. Big employers in Louisiana are predicted to be a little frightening. New York, and I'm really talking about New York State overall, may have some problems. It is one of those states that has got huge debt. And maybe the only way that they can recover that debt is to go out and borrow the money. And that is a scary thing. By the way, that is just what California just did this a couple of days ago. They went out and borrowed money for their unemployment. Now remember, states can't make their own money like the federal government can, and it looks pretty bad for those states that were not in good fiscal shape before all this started, and that's New York. Oh, and did I mention, same thing is true with Illinois. Its economy is not looking good. Now, if we were to say, is all of New York going to look bad? No, I think Long Island's going to do fine. I think if you look at just above Manhattan, I think it's going to do reasonably well and bounce back. I think Manhattan's going to be having a hard time. I think the east side of Chicago, which has never been spectacularly strong, is going to continue to be sort of a scary place to be. I don't often mention Toronto because it's in Canada and we don't cover Canada, but Canada is pretty much in debt, bad situation as far as all these policies I've already mentioned. And then we've got Los Angeles. Now, Los Angeles has not well prepared for any kind of emergency. I'm from LA. I love Los Angeles. I think parts of the valley are going to do well, the San Gabriel Valley included. But I think that we have a little bit of tension going on in Los Angeles that's going to make business properties, they're going to have to make them expensive in order to keep going. And I'm a little afraid that they've priced themselves out of the professional practice world. What I'm really telling you is there are parts within each of these states that are going to be great, but there are parts of them that are going to be very stressed. So I've already mentioned in Louisiana, the cities that I think are going to have a problem. You probably already know about Michigan and New York State. But I think what I'm saying is if you want to be in these states, and you can probably make a lot of money, you just better get the help of a good demographer who can identify why one neighborhood's good and another neighborhood's not. Now, moving on, there are some dire regional areas that I just want you to be aware of that I'm particularly concerned about. Eastern New Jersey, that's right along the river, that's going to be tough. Chicagoland, and I'm saying really the east side. New Orleans, I think, has had a long-term chronic problem, and it's not going to recover easily. And by the way, the pandemic just won't seem to leave them alone. I was surprised to find that Greater Boston seems to be having a real stress too. And I'm a little concerned about these dense cities that have been relying upon a single, well, you know, let's be honest. A lot of you know Boston because you went to school there. But you probably know that the schools in Greater Boston are being stressed. And they're even endowment of Harvard and others, they're having a hard time. The dense West Coast cities have always been having a little bit of a hard time. And Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, San Francisco, but also Central California on the coast, I think, is also having the problem with the schools, with employers, with being able to fund people coming into the country to pick crops. And let's face it, agriculture has long been a part of the West Coast and their economy, and I don't think anybody's recognized how hard it is. We'll see what happens in Washington and Oregon. I'm watching those very carefully. Another place that is dire is Maine. I have not seen Maine ever look so sad as it is looking right now. And so that's going to be an issue. A couple of other dire factors. When you have a population that is very densely populated, people are not wanting to stay. And because of the coronavirus, that virtuous city life that everybody loved is kind of looking worse and worse. So the expectation is those kinds of places are looking worse. The dependence on transit ridership, meaning like a subway, a major train, and this goes for New York, Greater Chicago, Boston, even Washington, D.C. are expected to have a more difficult time because mass transit, particularly a rail, they're not making good predictions for those areas surrounding those sites. Those places that are small, very small single-family dwelling units, or that have no affordable single-family dwelling units, are predicted to do worse in almost every state in the United States. They're likely to have the biggest problems. Real estate is going to go through the real estate values are. And so developers are freaking out about what they can afford to develop. Also, quick thing. Those places that they're not really auto friendly, don't like private vehicles, they're going to continue to have a problem. I'm just saying these are 5 elements that if you say, what should I be careful of about getting a job or starting up a practice? These are 5 elements that I think you have to evaluate. I'm not saying that the kiss of death, but I'm saying, guys, if you're really thinking about where to get a job, where to live, where to open a practice, where to purchase a practice, these are things that are going to matter increasingly. I have just a couple more things to go here. Quick contrast. South versus North. The southern states are doing better than the North. Florida has surprised everybody, but Texas is doing great. Oklahoma is doing well, and that's good. The East versus the West. The Western states, and I'm not talking about the coastal states in the West, but really everything that's on the Western side, they're doing pretty well. I'm a little worried about the Northeast states. Crowded versus room to grow states are kind of important. Now, Illinois has some lovely parts I love, but it also has some parts that are very crowded and they're not allowing for development. I'm just using that as an example. Indiana, everybody thought, no, it's too crowded up in the north part of the state. But as you look in the southern part, getting a rebirth and a better look. And a lot of people are moving from those areas that I mentioned to these areas that I'm mentioning. So do I think Indiana is going to continue to grow? Iowa, Nebraska? Do I think that Missouri and Colorado are going to do well? Idaho, Utah, Arizona, they're going to continue to do well. Texas will do well too. But I worry about those places that are not in flyover country. The Midwest and the Intermountain states are going to do well. Those places that are not, I'm a little worried about. So I know that I've kind of told you a lot of stuff here. Let me just tell you a couple more things. The Triage Care service that we have on our website is not expensive, but it's going to help get people in the door and in your chairs and operatories. You need a plan to publicize your services. Do not assume that the old word of mouth or referral base is still there. If there's anything that I've been saddened to see, it's how many people have kind of retired during this period of time. Now, Dr. Demographics has this thing, the Triage Care, that I want you to look at and do that now. Now, guys, I know that you tune into this podcast because we talk about specific places that are showing growth or that show good signs. And I mentioned some today that I think are going to be good and worth a look. But almost everybody says, yeah, but you know, my uncle has a practice that is going to be for sale, or I heard about a place in this other place that my friends and I are thinking about going to. I am going to do something that is really stupid for us. And I haven't really talked much about this to Mike, but he's the adult in the room. Here's the thing. We're offering a thing called a flash report. And I'm gonna actually ask Mike, he doesn't know this, to go onto our site and to create a link that will talk about a flash report. And what it is, it's a complete demographic report for super cheap, but it's only going to be open through May 20th. All right, May 20th, we pulled the plug, we're stopping this. I'm doing it because I want to make sure that when you're making decisions, you, my faithful viewers, listeners, and friends, that you can get a full demographic report very inexpensively. And $225 is as inexpensive as we get. It'll have the demographics and the psychographics, the projections and lifestyle, information on what the COVID-19 impact on the area has been. We're going to give you maps, competition. We're also going to give you projections on the area. This will be in drive time, zip codes, and also we'll give you a site analysis. We'll actually talk about it. Now look, this is stupid of me to do. All right, I should say, oh, yeah, now we got you over early. Yeah, now we're going to make some money. Guys, I'm doing it for $225 because I want to help you if you're loyal to us. But please do not assume we're going to have just all kinds of time on our hands. We don't have it. So if you want to get this, it's a first come, first serve thing. So Mike, can you put some kind of a link on our landing page that'll talk about the flash report?
Yes, Scott, I will.
Thank you. I know this is the crazy Eddie demographer.
Yeah.
In me, and I'm going, and Mike's probably rolling his eyes.
Well, I'm just wondering, did you take your pills this morning before you kind of thought through that, or?
Mike, when you love your doctor friends as much as I do, you don't need pills.
Okay.
Or maybe you do. Anyway, so you guys, please, drdemographics.com. If you have questions, info@drdemographics.com. I'm Scott McDonald. This is Mike Green. Guys, do it today. Do not delay on this because it isn't going to last very long. And by the way, the other bad news is when we kind of get like too many reports to do, this is not an entirely automated process. It takes us to do them. So we may have to just tell people, as we've done in the past, we can't do it quickly. So I want to thank everybody. Mike, is there anything you would like to add? Words of wisdom you got?
Yeah, we're over time quite a bit. I guess the biggest thing for me, just real quickly, is use this opportunity to think long term. I think COVID-19 is trying to force everybody to think in that this is a short-term thing, but I think it's a good exercise to think long term, because there may be something else that happens next summer, you know what I mean, that will have the same impact. And so to ensure yourself to create a safe environment for you in your practice well into the future, these are really good things and principles to be thinking through now. And coronavirus has kind of forced us to think of it, but I think it's a good opportunity and a good exercise to go through these things, looking at it in the long term.
Well, I tend to believe that's particularly true. And, I'm just a basic, I love research, and I love being able to say, this is what you need to know. I'm so sorry we went over, but I thought it was important enough that you ought to hear it. All right, everybody, thanks again. Please tell your friends and neighbors, your children and grandchildren to check us out next week, and I'll talk to you all later. Take care.